All right, folks. Good day, everyone, and welcome to Ep.2 of the Muscle Method podcast with myself, Taylor Camo, and Mr. Erik Patterson. Today, guys, we are going to be talking about the best split. What is the best split? Let's figure it out. Let's discuss. The answer is pretty simple. I think, Erik, you'll probably have the same answer as me, and then we can elaborate from there. So if you want to touch on it first, please go ahead and let's see what the best split is in your thoughts.
Yeah, so right away, it depends on your personal goals, and obviously it depends on how many days you can go to the gym every week, how many days you want to go to the gym every week, kind of like your work schedule, the days you actually feel like you can put some intensity into training. Yeah, so just an overview, it could be depending on a million factors, but overall, I would say the best split is the one that you're going to be able to adhere to consistently and go from there.
Boom. Yeah, it's pretty much that simple. So if we come at this from a strictly bodybuilding context, the best split is the one that individual needs right now at this current point in time for their physique outcomes. And that encompasses everything you just said, basically, into it depends. And we can kind of break that down again into, okay, how many days can you train? What's your volume needs? Basically around what your lagging body parts are. Are your legs enormous and you only need to train them with one working set every 2 weeks, like some people have to do? Or are you the opposite of that and your legs are literally sticks and you might need to train them 2-3 times per week and not train your arms at all because they're enormous, right? So the split entirely depends on the person and what they need at this time.
So we could kind of start. Obviously, the person watching this podcast is probably going to be at least an intermediate on average. But we can kind of just go over like what a beginner would do, which isn't going to be specific to anything, most likely. We'll just assume they don't have any injuries. They're not like paraplegic, they're not on a wheelchair or something, right? So it's just an all-rounded plan for, we'll say, bodybuilding development. We won't go into the strength side of things, or we can touch on that later.
Yeah. I mean, in bodybuilding, to keep it simple, if you're an intermediate, kind of the standard intermediate thing would be like a push-pull legs. You're training, you're not doing the typical bro split where you train one muscle group every day and then repeat that. That's kind of what I would deem as a beginner split because that's just what you do when you don't know what you're doing when you start out. So something where you're combining groups into that manner and then going from there and then taking your rest day and repeating is usually kind of a beginner an intermediate attempt at a bodybuilding split.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I mean, I'm a personal trainer, so I'd say the majority of the people. I guess I'm more like half and half with intermediates now. But for in person, on average, you're going to get that new person who either hasn't stepped foot in the gym before, or they're just having trouble being consistent. So they're probably going to be in the earlier stages. And I would say just full body splits all the way if you can. Obviously, like I'm restricted to a 1 hour session for most of my clients, and it's dependent on a few things. But let's say you go to a Good Life Fitness, they've got their machines all lined up for every body part. I usually tell people, say they're not even training with me, go there, do one set on each machine, maybe warm up a couple times, feel it out, find a good weight that gets you into a moderate rep range, let's say between 8 and 20 reps. We don't have to go into the details there. And just do the hardest set you can. One set, write it down in your booklet, in your phone, whatever, that's your baseline. And I guarantee if you haven't touched weights in a long time, you're going to be able to step into that gym 2 days later and you're probably going to be able to beat that. You're probably going to be able to beat it significantly. And so the idea there is, yeah, more isn't better in this case. So we're just creating a stimulus. And right now, one hard set is a completely new stimulus to that person, to that person's muscles, whatever. So that's going to be enough to more than I've ever done, or at least in the last few weeks, few months, years. And that's going to be a stimulus. And so I would say just ride that out, ride that simple kind of one set, simple movement pattern. Again, there's so much nuance to this stuff. You're building skills and stuff, right? You haven't lifted before if you're learning how to do a hinge, an RDL or something. But yeah, we can touch on that later. Yeah, simple, simple, simple. I'm all about simple. And then kind of the frequency, beginner can probably show up every day and they're going to be fine. and they're
Yeah.
going to recover. They can't even batter them their bodies if they tried.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a safe bet would be 2 to 3 full bodies, or say um, an upper lower four
Mm.
times a week, something like that. If you have a time constraint, but I think if you're doing one set per muscle group, then I think 1 hour would be plenty to get that done. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, yeah, there's a lot of factors to consider in what the, what you're breaking down someone's split for when you say that. It's, injuries, time. For you and I, it's basically, of our lives revolve around, we get to go to the gym for a living. So if it takes 3 hours to work out, doesn't really matter.
Well, you know what? It's funny because I spend so much time in the gym, but I find myself trying to spend less and less
Mm,
every year. Not that I don't enjoy it, but I
mm,
find, I prefer to get in and get out just with some quality work. And I've discovered that, hey, I can get away with some pretty minimal volume,
mm.
even as an advanced guy. But I'm also able to get a lot more out of 1 or 2 sets than maybe someone else.
Yeah, for sure. So if we're to give the people out there listening some simple tidbits, basically to design the best split for you. So think of those things. How many days a week can I go to the gym? The answer to that should not be more than 5, in my opinion. You probably don't need to go to the gym and lift 6 or 7 days a week. You might be doing something else. Maybe you want to do some cardio, some stretching, whatever. That's not part of your split. I'm in this aspect. So think about how many days a week can I go to the gym? If it's 3, probably going to be full body workouts. If it's 4, maybe it's an upper lower. If it's 5, maybe it's some kind of combination of things. And then you have to think about your goal. So for me, coming from coaching primarily bodybuilders, again, we look at this is this person head to toe, front to back, side to side, and say, okay, your body needs this. So chances are we need at least a 2 times frequency of this muscle group. And then potentially everything else is once or maybe twice, depending on how developed it is, and then go from there. And then you have to also listen to the first episode we did around the volume and then plug that into your split, which is then
Possibly
makes it
get
a little
more
more
confused.
complicated. Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I would ask you about how many of your guys that aren't, super advanced, and maybe they're trying to squeeze out the last few pounds of muscle on their physique, on their frame. How many guys do you think actually need some kind of a significant specialization for a body part? Like in my experience, not many.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, so I think I get a bit of a genetic cream of the crop from coaching bodybuilders. It's usually the people with the already good physiques that want to take it to the next level, who usually have some pretty outstanding body parts. And even then, they're training things no more than twice a week. I only have one client currently. His arms are poo-poo and he knows this. So we have him training his bis and his tris 3 times per week. So off the top, I believe his split is 3 push days and 2 lower days. And on the push days, there's 4 or 5 sets of bis and tris. Yeah, I think it's 4. So it'd be like a Monday, a Wednesday, and then a Friday for the upper. And then his back is enormous, so we only have him training his back 2 sets 2 times per week. This is how it all kind of gets played out with certain people.
well, at least small arms. That's a good
Yeah,
problem to have.
yeah,
Those
and
are pretty
yeah,
easy to train, pretty low fatigue, and you can kind of just throw them in on. Technically, you can kind of throw them in on any day.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So something like that that's not super demanding, cool. A lot of coaches put arm days on leg days. Do a couple sets of biceps before your leg
Yeah,
workout because it doesn't matter. It's not going to impact it in any way. So those are kind
yeah.
of things. But most of my clients are pretty standard in some capacity, training everything 2 times per week. I've got a few upper lowers. I've got a few push pull legs. I've got a few, like we've discussed, the split that I'm doing, push pull legs, upper lower. Um, I've got one guy doing push pull legs, push pull. So it's all kind of designed around what those individuals need. And as you can see with the variety, there's no right answer. It's what does that person need? So to all you guys listening, don't jump on the bandwagon of this newest split or that newest split. Find what you need for yourself just because, yeah.
That's the big thing, especially if you get a lot of your information from social media. You see how there's trends. I'd say 98% of the stuff out there is just trends, and
Yeah.
you'll see them. They'll kind of like fashion. You'll see it circle back. 5 years later, all of a sudden we're back to the trend is upper lower,
Yeah.
and then there's the full body, and then I don't know what you're seeing lately. It's Well, obviously with the very, 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 very low volume, super, super heavy, high intensity. Yeah, the kind of ridiculous stuff you're seeing. But kudos to those guys who are trying to, actually invested in trying to optimize things, because that's
Mm.
more than what I did when I was young. I don't want to talk about what I used to do because I don't really know. It was different
Yeah.
probably every week
Yeah.
when I started.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, things have evolved a lot. We have a lot better access to good stuff to figure out what not to do right away.
What I will say real quick, you'll see the trend in what Taylor and I are going on with programming is most often we're probably going to try to hit a muscle group at least twice per week,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
And so old school bodybuilding was very much that one body part once per week with a lot of volume. Okay. And that works. Obviously, there's a lot of guys who got huge doing that. But something to consider is I'm sure a lot of guys have experienced this, say the first 5 to 8 sets of your workout using some pretty heavy loads. You're probably able to hit some PRs. And then the latter half of your workout, you're kind of using this. Sometimes you're down to like 60% of the load. And I'll see this in the gym all the time. It's the most common thing I see. I can tell these guys are like 12 sets into a muscle group. Though the weight they're using is barely anything because they're fatigued. So they can't even get that high tension on the muscle. So they're responding to just more that pump metabolite. So they think, more pump, more stimulus. So that's a big confusion that I see. Not that, more volume won't result in more, but we know there's like this massively diminishing return. And then if we're talking training day by day, week by week, can you actually sustain that without feeling like you've been destroyed? So the twice a week, just splitting the volume into 2 different days with adequate rest between, usually on average a couple days. Sometimes you can get away with less. That just allows you to hit a muscle group with a little bit more intensity. Let's say you cut that volume in half, but you can put a little bit more just quality into those sets.
Yeah, 100%. One thing that you said, you mentioned a keyword, rest, and that made me think, we didn't talk about this yet, I didn't mention it, is day jobs, right? You and I, for the most part, this is our day job, sitting down, except for when you're with clients and you're walking around. But you
Unfortunately,
ultimately, yeah, yeah. But ultimately,
unfortunately, I don't get to sit down until a little later on. But
yeah. So most of my day is this. Right? So I
yep,
sit here versus someone else who could be a construction worker or a road worker or a farmer or whatever else. You have to factor in that into your split as well. The reality is you're definitely not going to train 6 or 7 days a week. Your body's not going to be able to recover from that. And you also need to factor that into the volume that you're doing. Another discussion. But your day job is incredibly important in your split, not only the hours that you're working, but what you do physically and being able to program the physique outcomes that you want. So
yeah.
be mindful of that, folks.
So I'll touch on that. Like those guys that are working construction, especially the labor positions where they're just steadily doing some general labor, physical labor. Like the benefit with those guys is they usually have really good cardiovascular fitness. So they're usually they have like just a well-rounded fitness.
Hmm.
So they can tolerate, a little bit more fatigue, and they can generate a lot more force over a workout just because they're fitter. Their
Hmm.
body's used to, working long hours. But when fatigue starts to build up, obviously, next day, oh shit, I'm up at 5 a.m. and I've got to do work all day and I've got to train later on. You realize, okay, you're playing with, or you don't have as much room to play with in terms of recovery. So there's that balance, right? Just those other nuances, factors to consider.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, the level of activity you do and beating up on yourself, you don't want to add more to it or else you're not going to grow. That's when those low volume splits and low frequencies or low volume, higher frequency splits might be very advantageous. Do a couple
Yeah.
working sets a couple times a week. Boom. Watch yourself just blow up. Sweet. Yeah,
So
pretty
should
good.
we
So
touch on kind of just quickly, maybe when, I guess we're not talking so much about volume, we're just talking about split. So yeah, I was just going to go on, just kind of touch briefly on when would be a good time if someone's wondering like, hey, should I be increasing frequency?
mm,
Like say my volume is set, increasing frequency. Say you have, one day a week and you're trying to hit 8 sets for that body part and you're finding the last few sets, you're just, no matter what, you just don't have a lot of gas and you're not
mm,
getting much out of it. And then that would be, say if it's on average after 5 or 6 sets, 2 or 3 exercises. And then, yeah, you want a little bit more volume. And that's a good sign that, hey, we need to push. It's probably better to push those extra volume, that extra 2, 4, maybe 6 sets to another day. Right.
Yeah.
And by not being able to push hard is like, say, in your logbook, those numbers just aren't those last 4 sets. Let's say you're just never improving on them. I would argue, yeah, it's more volume and maybe you're getting something out of that, even if the numbers aren't going up, maybe.
Mm.
But I'm in doubt, right? I think generally we want to see that logbook at least, titrate up a little bit. Maybe those later sets, you're going to see a rep every 2 weeks or 5 pounds every 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. But if those things just aren't progressing, you just keep doing it because you're used to it, but those numbers aren't progressing, move those exercises or those sets to another day. I would say 99% of the time, if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good note on when to change your split, basically, is, when do you stop seeing the outcomes that you want, or did you do it and it's not even working in the first place? Right.
Sure.
So it kind of comes down to the same idea of how long do you stick to a certain exercise, 4 to 6 weeks, maybe, before kind of swapping things out to see if it's what's right for you or what's where you need to be, and then go from there, because you don't want to just program hop. We all know those folks that do that and don't end up accomplishing anything, because it's just none of it's what they need. Or maybe they found the right thing, but they saw the new shiny object and went and chased that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't want
We're all
that.
guilty of that.
Yeah, 100%. So what are some other important things to consider when choosing the right splits? We touched on, your ultimate, well, not really what your ultimate goal is, of course, determines that. Maybe you just want to develop an Arnold like chest. Well, train your chest every day and you don't care about a certain body part. So you have to kind of consider your ultimate goal. Again, if we're coming at it from a bodybuilding standpoint, it's work on your weaknesses primarily and get
Why
something
don't
there.
we touch on, so we kind of agreed upon on the volume
Mm,
podcast. I think we kind of had a general agreement that, that 8 to 12, I think, sets per muscle group in terms of volume was a pretty good sweet spot to get your best for the average person. Remember, this depends, 8 to 12 per muscle group. And we're talking hard sets. These are working sets. These are ones within 0 to maybe 3 reps from absolute failure,
mm,
depending. Yeah. So I think some of the recent, like, meta analyses are actually showing that they're kind of falling back into that 8 to 12, which actually was kind of that research or the general consensus even 10 years ago, right? It's funny how that pendulum was going up to that high volume for a bit, in terms of, we see the trend, we see some of that research in high volume and people were trying it and saying it's the best.
mm.
And then we see that pendulum go the other way. We're seeing some people going very, very, very low volume. And then, it ends up being somewhere in the middle. Yeah, so 8 to 12 sets per muscle group. I would definitely say don't do that all in one day unless you have no choice per
Yeah.
muscle group,
Yeah.
right? So consider that when you make your split. We'd ideally like to spread that frequency out over at least 2 days. Depending on your split, you can even do 3.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like you mentioned with your guy doing 3 push days. I think 3 arms hit on 3 separate days a week.
Mm,
And let's also quickly touch on, it doesn't have to be a 7 day split. It doesn't have to be that set day, Monday to Sunday,
yeah.
right? Maybe it's a staggered 10 day split, something like
Mm,
that. Um, but again, what falls back to the person's schedule, ultimately what works for them, when they can actually go to the gym, how long. So that's always the question number one. What does your day look like? What does your week look like for work? What are other places you need to be during the
mm.
week? When can you actually get food in to train hard? Once we cover those individual contexts, then okay, now we can start to build upon that.
Yeah. Like, to use an example of what you just said, like my traditional split right now currently is push pull legs upper lower. With the month of July, I basically was home here a total of about 5 days. So I just did upper lower because it was the easiest thing to do. Okay, I know I'm not going to be able to train several days a week because I'm flying back and forth across the country, meeting shows, whatever. When I'm in the gym, I need to try to hit everything twice a week. Okay, upper lower day, boom, boom, in and out in an hour and a half max. It gets it done. Plenty of stimulus. Am I going to get massive and grow crazy from that? No, but am I definitely going to sustain everything that I have? Yes. And that's really all that mattered at that point in time, was getting in, doing it, lifting some heavy stuff and going home. And then once the routine settles down, get back into what I know is tried and true for me right now. And then, yeah, super important. Like you said, ideally frequency is 2 times per week. Of course, very individual specific on things, and divide those, 3 to 5 to 6 working sets per those 2 sections. Doesn't need to be 7 days, like you said. Yeah. So those are really good points for people to consider. Obviously, with most of our lives, there's pretty consistencies, or there's big consistency day to day. So yes, it helps to know that you're only training, Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then you have your rest days and whatnot. Depending on how serious you are about your goals and what you're trying to accomplish, you might have to have a little bit of inconsistency there, and schedule your life around your training if that's what you really want.
Yeah. So I guess what I would say next is if someone's wondering, they build a split that works with their schedule,
Mm.
something they enjoy, you know, that's a big importance. I think you want to keep some stuff in that you hate doing, but it's good for you, right? But you also want to keep some stuff in that you enjoy, because I think that's important for just longevity in this sport. You don't want to burn yourself out, but you don't want to hate it. The
No.
people that succeed in this sport, they don't love every aspect, but they love the process overall.
Yeah.
So yeah, if someone's asking, like, I don't know if my split is working or not, like, what do I look for? What variables? Like, this one sounds quite obvious. Like, hey, is that logbook improving steadily? Depending if you're a beginner, that logbook will probably move along every week. Intermediate, it can move along every week if you've got everything dialed in
Yeah.
terms of your recovery variables and such. Yeah, but if you find that logbook is just not moving, right? You're putting the effort, the intensity into your workouts, you're showing up, it's not moving. So you ask yourself, okay, are you getting your basics down? Are you hitting your calories?
Mm.
At least hitting maintenance? Ideally a small surplus. Won't go too far into that, of course. Your basic sleep needs, what would you say, 7 to 9 hours? Good sleep. Usually the higher end is better if you're a serious bodybuilder on the regular. Say you're nailing those other recovery fundamentals and it's still not improving. You're training hard. Okay, that's when some things, those are some questions you can ask yourself. You
Yeah.
don't have to be so fixated on, okay, this totally makes sense. This split, it should be good. This is what all these guys are running and having good results. But this is where I tell people to learn how to just pick up on their individual response and just be very confident in reading those individual things. I think that's what a lot of good bodybuilders do. A lot of pros, they'll
Mm.
talk about they're fired up talking about this is what works for me. And sometimes it's different than
Mm.
average. Sometimes it's different from what's recommended, right? I'm sure you've
Yeah.
seen that interviews with pros and they say they do something that not many other guys do, and it's individual to them. And then obviously there has to be something there. So within the realm of covering the basics, don't be afraid to find some things that just work for you,
Mm. Yeah.
right? Maybe it's just an exercise or a way you execute it. Don't try to keep pushing a triangle shape through a square hole, right? Don't keep trying to push like it should work. It should work. It should work. That's when you ask yourself, you know what, man, it's not working. I don't care if everyone else is doing it. We need to change something.
Totally.
Just have an honest conversation with yourself or with your talk it over with your coach. Yeah, there's no must do exercise or
Mm.
number of sets, whatever.
Yeah. So kind of one of the things you've touched on in like determining if it's right, that it's going to kind of overlap, is similar to how we determine if it's the right volume. Are you recovering in time? Are you seeing those progressive overloads that you want? How does your body feel? One thing's for sure, if you do 10 sets today of chest, there's zero chance that you should be doing another, even one set of chest on 2 days later, right? So
Yeah.
you need to determine your split in that way. Your 3, 4, 5 sets, at least 48 hours minimum in between them. Generally speaking, if you can get, 42 to 72 hours in between, depending on what you're doing, that's kind of the golden rule
And
for
I'll cut
design.
you off real quick there about that. Like, sorry, if someone says, no, I train my chest 2 days later, 10 sets here, 10 sets there, guarantee that's not going to work for very long. I
No,
guarantee it. You're always going to fall into issues, right? It's going to stop progressing, or you're just going to screw up a joint. There's just no way you're training hard enough and recovering hard enough to do that. I don't care who you are. So don't have this impulsive response to something that it's worked for 2 weeks. Like, how do you know if something worked over two
Mm,
weeks?
yeah.
And I see it all the time. Guys getting fired up over doing a split for, it's not even a month. And they're saying it's the best split ever. And too soon, Matt. Like, that's great that it's working, or you feel like it's working, ride it out, see how it
Mm,
runs over weeks. Because it's not just day by day or even week by week sometimes. You should be able to, ride out some weeks, maybe a few months, maybe add a rest day here and there, depending. And you shouldn't always have to be taking, 3 steps backwards because you're getting beat up,
yeah.
because you're getting injured. See it all the time again. I'm guilty of it. Push hard, too soon, getting silly with the overload when my body's not really ready for it. So again, it's just an honest conversation with yourself. Yeah. So there's a whole lot of nuance to this, of course, again, and it's not so easy as just giving someone a split as a coach. Like, that's not where the value of a coach comes from. That's just such a little sliver
Mm,
of it, right? So at the end of this, I hope people can see that split it's important, but it's not the end all be all. It's just one variable. And I think people put way too much importance on that beyond just kind of nailing some fundamental variables in a split.
yeah. So here's a question that I get kind of posed frequently is my muscle group is still sore. What should I do? So when I hear that question, it sounds to me like someone isn't following a set plan. So they're just kind of going into the gym and doing whatever and not following something designed. So we also, within all this, we need to hone in that a split is important to do. You do need one. You do need structure. You can't
Yes.
just wing it if you expect to see results long term because there's no way to track anything.
Keyword structure. And then, yeah, there's flexibility within that.
Yeah. So if something's still sore, it's either you did too much that day or it's too close of a time frame that you're training it again, or potentially both. So if you're listening to this, you're like, guys, this is me. I'm always sore. Well, are you doing too much volume or is your frequency too soon? So think about that for yourselves out there and say, oh, duh, you know, or is your training style, you're doing 100 drop sets and you're doing crazy long stretches and et cetera, right? So there's another factor in there too that needs to be considered, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially if we're talking like constantly sore
Mm,
for the entirety of your split just across the week versus, hey, I just started a new split and there's some novel exercises, or maybe I would say rep ranges. So if you're not
mm,
used to working in a higher rep range and you add that in, yeah, I would say some soreness is going to be normal for the first couple weeks, but definitely it goes down very quickly after you've done that that
yeah,
that split for, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks. And if not, there's definitely some recovery issues there. Yeah, that's soreness isn't something to brag about. Constant soreness. It's not hard to make people sore. You can do some stupid shit to make your muscles sore. It's not going to mean you grow.
yeah, 100%. Anything else on the subject of splits that we have not covered?
Yeah, I guess to simplify and break it down per individual, I guess that way we're trying to prevent that, right? We're trying to
Mm,
just talk about some fundamentals. So you have your set volume, let's say 8 to 12, and this doesn't apply to everyone. Again, we can't from this video give you the perfect split for
mm,
you, but we
no,
can give you some ideas on how to do that. So
yeah,
when we talk fundamentals, just some of the basics of program design, yeah, let's say 8 to 12 sets. I'm pretty comfortable saying that for a muscle group. 8 to 12 sets, working sets per week, or yeah, I would say per week. And then frequency, ideally twice per week, again, depending, but for
yeah.
the average person. And yeah, works with your schedule.
One important thing that we didn't really talk about, which kind of mentioned, but sequencing. So if you have a shitty body part, like most of us do, probably your calves, right? So I started training my calves 3 times a week. So I didn't mention my push pull legs up or lower. I train my calves at the start of my sessions. So the order that you sequence your movements in is going to have an impact on what your results are. So for example, going back to my client who his arms are bad, we sequence his bicep and tricep stuff, not necessarily right at the start, because I still want him to get good effort and execution out of his compound stuff, but they're in the middle and then again at the end so that there's some stimulus higher in there so that they're not as fatigued, etc. So you guys need to think about that when designing your program. If it's bodybuilding related, do you have bad calves? Chances are you're listening. You probably do, because most guys do. It's just the reality. Sorry. Program them at the start of your workouts. Doing calves before you do squats or leg press isn't going to impact it. Doing calves at the start of your push day, like I do, is not going to impact your push day. So be aware of that. You don't necessarily want to do a bunch of bicep work right before you do a bunch of pull downs and rows, unless you have the new, all these fancy new only lat movements where you're just strapping yourself here. Well, then that doesn't matter. You can do all the bicep work you want, but you also need to think about your sequencing within your split design and how you're programming your movements.
No, that's perfect. And right there, being just brutally honest with yourself again with that sequencing. You got to work on your abs. You keep putting them at the end of your workout. I'm guilty of this. And you always tell yourself, this time I'll do it. This week I'll do it. This week I'll do it. And then all of a sudden, 2 months has gone by and either you've skipped abs, that workout because you're just, it's like a broken record. You're too tired, or maybe you do some really half-ass ones. You get to them, but they're just, you're not executing, right? You're getting something out of them, but you're definitely not maximizing it. So that's just an honest conversation. And even the best pros do this, right? And they're the most disciplined guys in the world. They're the last guys who are going to skip exercises, but even they will put these things at the front because they know this. Right? If I want to improve this muscle group, calves, prioritize it. Make it like most guys will prioritize their biceps and their triceps and their chest, right? Not as common. You see those people not be able to grow those because most guys just prioritize them. They have their own day and they start with them. So same idea. And that does, again, that's such a good point. If you want a very good physique, that goes such a long way. You spend a year or two doing something like that, prioritizing those muscle groups you want to improve, just put them at the front, maybe add frequency, maybe add volume. And that can really transform your physique, I would
And
say.
I really want to accentuate what you said about the year or two. It's probably 2, 3, 4, or 5, realistically.
Yeah,
So,
depending for sure.
Yeah.
I would say, honestly, some guys neglect some body parts so bad that, like, say it's even core and there's, say, hip flexors, stuff that people don't actually, and then maybe they have consistent knee pain or some hip issues. And okay, what muscle group, you're pretty smart with everything in recovery and you're having this persistent issue. What muscle groups are you really just completely neglecting? And try to tie that in and see what happens, at least functionally. So that might even kind of translate to better function across the board. Women who don't train their arms, possibly with shoulder issues, doesn't mean you have to train them to get big, maybe a couple sets here and there. Those biceps do cross the shoulder joint. We got the triceps, parts of the triceps cross the shoulder joint. They contribute to stability of the shoulder. Same with those hip flexors crossing the hip, blah, blah, blah. If at least train them from a functional standpoint, you don't have to hammer them with volume that's actually going to significantly grow them. So that's something to appreciate. Working on your calves, improving your dorsiflexion, possibly your ankle mobility. Maybe that's translating to some better quad gain.
Squat patterns. Yeah, exactly.
All these things kind of can translate in different ways.
Yeah. Your body is one fluid unit that your neck affects your ankles somehow, right? It's all magic.
How many guys want to, I really want my hip flexors to get really developed? You only really see that on stage when a guy has, some attention there maybe, but I would say just from a functional standpoint. And there's no shortage of guys with bad knees and bad lower backs. I'm not saying that working your hip flexors is going to fix that, but it's definitely, that's a window. That's a place to start.
Yeah. So to anyone listening, call yourselves out right now. We know that you are neglecting something and that you put it at the end of your workout and you haven't done it for a month or two and you do it every once in a while. You need to put that at the start of your workouts. You need to put that at the start of your workouts at least 2 times per week. You know what it is as soon as you heard us say it. So start doing it and program that in. That's probably the most important thing we can give you today, realistically,
Big time.
in terms of overall development.
Just brutal, self-reflection. And I'll be the first to say it's hard. Like, even as a guy who's done this almost half his life, I miss things. It's hard. I get overwhelmed, especially when other things in life get stressful, lose some motivation. I'm still disciplined. I still show up, but it's tough to cover all those variables. It's tough to go in and work on those things you suck at. Because when you're you're working on those weak points and you're just rattling, you're working on your core and you feel you're using no weight, you just feel like a wimp. The best guys, they'll go on and do that stuff. They don't just continue 10 years later having neglected those movement patterns or something. Hinges are a big one. Guys just not ever doing a hinge and then wondering why every time they bend over with loads, their back just feels fragile. So again, it's not something that's going to fix everything per se. It's, neglecting big movement patterns and stuff over years. I guarantee that's going to end up either causing you some mobility issues, functional issues, or your physique's just not going to look as complete,
Yeah.
especially when you're on stage. That's going to show.
Yeah. No, there's some good points right there for y'all. So to kind of bring it all together, you got to kind of think about, so if we're going to summarize everything today, how many days a week can I go to the gym and or want to go to the gym, right? So might need to be some balance of that. So just because you want to go to the gym 7 days a week doesn't mean you should. Break your volume up into potentially 2 sessions over those 3 to 5 training days that you do. I wouldn't, here's an important thing that we haven't talked about yet. How many days in a row should you train? I would not recommend doing your 5 training days in a row if you can avoid that. I'd recommend probably no more than 3 days in a row, depending on what you're doing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree, especially if you're going in trying to go balls to the wall, big stimulus every day. But I would say if um, there's definitely a good reason to sometimes go to the gym and just do a light day. Maybe it's technique work. Maybe it's just doing a little bit of core work or something, right? We're not talking like a full day where you're taking big, heavy compounds to failure. Maybe if you're going Monday to Friday, that Wednesday's just, you're maybe hitting arm and delts or something that we know, okay, that's not adding much to the recovery. Maybe from a mental standpoint, you getting to the gym and just doing something is helpful for you. So in that context, just the routine, maybe it's helpful for you. But definitely I would question anyone who says they're training really hard and they're training 5 days in a row. Not a chance I could do that. Not a chance. I'd be pushing through fatigue and just not hitting numbers. And if I could do it for a week or two, absolutely not 3, 4 weeks in. And no program should have you having to pull way back after 2 weeks. Just a shitty program that's poorly implemented if you're already blasted after 2 weeks. If anything, you're giving yourself run a little bit of runway over those first 2 weeks as you implement a new split, learn the movements, refine them. And then by week 3 and 4, now you're starting to really dial them in.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I was one of those guys, trained 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, and rested on Sunday. And man, I wish I didn't, looking back at things now. But, it is what it is. We thought more was better and go, go, go.
And to the young guys, I would point out, when you're 20 and maybe you're not working very much, or you're just going to school full time, you probably feel like, oh yeah, I'm recovering. Like I feel good. I feel lots of energy. I can show up and work out. And you're probably not hitting your numbers though. You're probably just chasing a pump. You're there. Just listen to us, please. Because I wish when I went back, or if I could go back, I was very stubborn and I wouldn't listen to a lot of just common sense things because I was just stubborn. And those are things I would change. I would definitely go back and have just structure and not go in trying to annihilate myself. Go in trying to create the stimulus, be a little bit better than the previous week if possible, and not just add more because of it because you're feeling great. You got a good pump. Let's do 10 more sets. It's just a great way to flatline your progress.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
So maturity. I even have to talk to 40, 50-year-olds about just being mature about it.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean just self-reflection. Is this actually working? Or am I just going to the gym doing what I feel like? What's going to make you happier? Getting results consistently or just week after week? Getting that pump feels good on the day, but you never progress. To me, doing what I need to do and seeing the progress week by week, month by month, every year, that's far more satisfying.
So yeah, folks, think about that. But yeah, super important. How many days a week in a row do you train? Yes, you can go 5 days in a row, technically not lifting hardcore 5 days in a row, split it up with some cardio and some mobility stuff. And then kind of another tangent into that, it's some mobility and or stretch, well, and is stretching. Build some stuff like that into your split. So you have the days that you train. Make sure whether it's after one of your days, on one of your rest days, if it's at home in a gym, whatever, do some stretching. Put that in there because that is going to be uber important for
Yeah,
your long-term health and well-being. Yes,
that's a
lifting
good
heavy
point.
stuff is
Yeah,
important, but
it's a good point. If you want to be active on another day, do vascular work, right? Most of us neglect that, or lots of us do. If we're talking mobility, it could even be a mixed sports twice a week, something like volleyball or mixed sports. I'm not kidding when I say that alone, just a little bit of cardiovascular work, some dynamic movement, just some athletic movement, even twice a week, that does magic for your just overall ability to move well. And even if you don't even do passive stretching and stuff, even if you just did something like that, putting your body through ranges of motion, tolerating different types of tension, explosiveness, all those variables, that I guarantee is going to go so far for you, and it will translate to bodybuilding to some degree, unless the sport itself is soccer and everyone tears their knees up or something, right? Within reason, right? So don't be afraid of being a more well-rounded athlete. And that's another mistake I did,
yeah,
avoiding cardio, avoiding which is just a big component of bodybuilding, right?
100%.
Your ability to do work and sustain it,
Yeah,
rather than doing 3 sets and feeling like you're sucking wind and you feel like a piece of shit for the rest of the day because you don't recover well. So
yeah,
that's a big component.
yeah,
And yeah, that should be included in a split. Maybe if you're a construction worker, yeah, maybe we don't have to implement the cardio if you're steady working all day.
yeah. Sweet. I think that basically covers everything that
Yeah,
comes down to designing the right split for you. So basically, to summarize it, there is no best split. There's the best split for you and you
yeah.
and you and you for what you want to achieve right now. So
And it's going
don't
to
get
be
too, yeah, don't get too wrapped up about what you hear online and what is this and what is that. Find the things that you like, that you need, and there isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer. There could be multiple right answers, right?
totally
It really depends.
more than one thing can be true
Yeah,
at the time. It's not black and white like social media portrays to you, where this is the best, that's the worst. It's literally all gray area. Fitness
yeah,
and nutrition, it's all gray area. And yeah, we have the fundamentals. Most of us fall in this smaller zone of gray area with some outliers, but it's all going to be individual. And even whether it's you on your own or when you're working with a coach, who's going to help you along the way, there's still a whole lot of self-reflection that has to go in. A coach cannot, unless he's with you every day, watching you, which most coaches are not. There still has to be all these things at
yeah,
play, and you have to communicate that with your coach. That's
yeah,
a big thing. Be brutally honest. Don't just listen to them and not question them. The coach knows what they're doing and they're
yeah,
confident in what they're doing. They love questions, right? Because they,
yeah,
they can give you an explanation.
yeah. I think
Like, why?
one important thing to note for everyone listening to is as long as you're seeing results, don't overcomplicate this, don't overthink it. If you're training hard with the right amount of volume and you're seeing progressive overload, chances are you're doing something right. You don't necessarily need to change it to make it 1%
Yeah.
better because maybe you can't, maybe you're doing everything that you need to be. So if you're seeing all the things stack up and the outcome that you want is happening, more than likely it is what is right for you right now. So keep doing it until you don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah, I'd say ride it out. Don't change a thing. If it is working, ride that out. Don't get cocky and add because, if it's working, then more is going to work better.
I think that finally covers it, folks, and we can wrap it there with what the best split is. So this was episode 2. We're going to keep diving into this, try to do a monthly one. Please, guys, like, comment, share, subscribe, all those fun things. Follow Erik, hit him up for coaching. Follow myself, hit me up for coaching. We're here to help you grow, be better, and try to simplify the complicated world of lifting stuff up and putting it down.
Yeah, Taylor and I are, one of the main reasons we're doing this is so we can be better as coaches, better at communicating. It's a lot to just take all this stuff we have in our head and actually translate it in a meaningful way, in a concise way. So it definitely helps. I don't know if you agree with this, Taylor, like just questions. So put questions in the comments. Like maybe if you want to ask about your own context and split it, we can get to it.
Yeah.
with an answer, something to help you out. Yeah, and then I would say what you could link as a template. I don't know if you know the Lyle McDonald general bulking routine, which has been around for at least a decade. You could probably post a link to that. He just has it on his website. And it's actually right in line at hitting each muscle group. I believe it's like 8 to 10, maybe up to 12 sets per week. And it's just a basic, everything's targeted with adequate volume, kind of what we're talking about for a good starting point. I believe it's 3 or 4 days a week.
Okay.
And then there's some instructions on his site, which is fantastic in terms of if you could add a day or if you take away a day, if you had a set, take away a set, stuff like that. It's a great general standpoint, even up for like a later advanced intermediate, I would say. So that would be a cool template just to look at and then go off of what you learn from us in terms of how you can, add or subtract from that or yeah, just make specific to you, specific to the equipment you have available to you, all those things.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So guys, like you said, drop your questions, drop them in the comments, send us messages, give us ideas. I'll link that up so you guys can learn and have something to program for yourselves. And then until next time, thank you all. We appreciate you listening.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.